Now, amid heightened tensions with China, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has started his three-nation Southeast Asia tour. The region is central to Washington's Indo-Pacific policy. Now, on the first leg of tour, Blinken landed in Indonesia, where he met President Joko Widodo. Blinken congratulated Widodo on Indonesia's G20 presidency and expressed support for its Indo-Pacific leadership role. He said, as a strong proponent of the rules-based international order. The duo also discussed bilateral and regional cooperation. Climate crisis and the coronavirus pandemic also came up during the talks. Indonesia and US are all set to sign bilateral agreements on maritime partnership.
At the present case. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen.
US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is currently in Jakarta. Listen in.
Mr. Antony Blinken.
Well, good morning, everyone. It is wonderful to be with all of you. And Dr. Kusumayati, thank you so much for the generous introduction, but more than that, thank you for decades of service, working to improve public health, to educate the next generation of doctors and nurses, including as the first woman to serve as the university's Dean of the School of Public Health. From your research on reproductive health to your leadership on Indonesia's COVID task force, your dedication to your community is truly inspirational, and I thank you.
That's it.
Indonesia juga mengharapkan dapat menjadi bagian dari rantai pasok global untuk bidang kesehatan.
The Indo-Pacific will, more than any other region, shape the trajectory of the world in the 21st century. The Indo-Pacific is the fastest growing region on the planet. It accounts for 60% of the world economy, 2/3 of all economic growth over the last 5 years. It's home to more than half the world's people, 7 of the 15 biggest economies. And it's magnificently diverse, more than 3,000 languages, numerous faiths stretching across 2 oceans and 3 continents. Even a single country like Indonesia is home to a rich patchwork that's hard to distill, except for its variety. And this nation's motto holds, Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, unity in diversity, which sounds pretty familiar to an American. In the United States, we say, e pluribus unum, out of many one. It's the same idea. The United States has long been, is, and always will be an Indo-Pacific nation. This is a geographic fact. From our Pacific coast states to Guam, our territories across the Pacific. And it's a historical reality, demonstrated by our 2 centuries of trade and other ties with the region. Today, half of the United States' top trading partners are in the Indo-Pacific. It's a destination for nearly 1/3 of our exports, the source of $900 billion in foreign direct investment in the United States. And that's creating millions of jobs spread across all 50 of our states. And more members of our military are stationed in the region than anywhere outside the continental U.S., ensuring peace and security that have been vital to prosperity in the region, benefiting us all. And of course, we're tied together by our people, whose connections go back generations. There are more than 24 million Asian Americans living in the United States, including Ambassador Sung Kim, when he's not serving his country in one part of the world or another, as he has been for the last 3 decades. Before the pandemic, there were more than 775,000 students from the Indo-Pacific studying at U.S. colleges and universities. And your American classmates here at Universitas Indonesia are among the millions of Americans who have come to the region to study, to work, to live, including one who went on to become our president. There's an Indonesian proverb, one that I'm told kids are taught from a young age. We have 2 ears, but only 1 mouth. That means that before we speak or act, we have to listen. And we've done a lot of listening to people in the Indo-Pacific in the first year of this administration to understand your vision for the region and its future. We've welcomed leaders from the region in our country, including the first 2 foreign leaders President Biden hosted after taking office from Japan and South Korea, and all the foreign ministers whom I've had the privilege of hosting at the State Department, including Foreign Minister Retno. And we've come to your region, Vice President Harris, Secretary of Defense Austin, Secretary of Commerce Raimondo, and so many other cabinet members, not to mention many senior State Department officials from my team. The President has participated in multi-leader level summits held by key regional bodies, APEC, the U.S. ASEAN and East Asia summits, and the Quad, made up of India, Japan, and Australia. I've done the same with fellow foreign ministers, including hosting the Mekong U.S. Partnership Ministerial. And President Biden has met with Indo-Pacific leaders overseas as well, including a very productive meeting with President Shekawi in Glasgow during the COP26. But we're not just listening to leaders. At our embassies and consulates across the region, our diplomats are using 2 ears to take in the views of people from all walks of life: students, activists, academics, entrepreneurs. And while it's an extraordinarily diverse region with distinct interests, distinct views, we see a great deal of alignment between the vision we're hearing from the Indo-Pacific and our own. People and governments of the region want more, better opportunities for all of their people. They want more chances to connect within their nations, between their nations, around the world. They want to be better prepared for crises like the pandemic that we're living through. They want peace and stability. They want the United States to be more present and more engaged. And above all, they want a region that is more free and more open. So what I'd like to do today is to try to set out that shared vision and how together we're going to work to make it a reality. And there are 5 core elements that I'd like to focus on. First, we will advance a free and open Indo-Pacific. Now, we talk a lot about a free and open Indo-Pacific, but we don't often define what we actually mean by that. Freedom is about the ability to write your future and have a say in what happens in your community and your country, no matter who you are or who you know. And openness naturally flows from freedom. Free places are open to new information and points of view. They're open to different cultures, religions, ways of life. They're open to criticism, to self-reflection, as well as to renewal. When we say that we want a free and open Indo-Pacific, we mean that on an individual level, that people will be free in their daily lives and live in open societies. We mean that on a state level, that individual countries will be able to choose their own path and their own partners. And we mean that on a regional level, that in this part of the world, problems will be dealt with openly, rules will be reached transparently and applied fairly, goods and ideas and people will flow freely across land, cyberspace, and the open seas. We all have a stake in ensuring that the world's most dynamic region is free from coercion and accessible to all. This is good for people across the region. It's good for Americans, because history shows that when this vast region is free and open, America is more secure and more prosperous. So, we'll work with our partners across the region to try to realize this vision. We'll continue to support anti-corruption and transparency groups, investigative journalists, think tanks across the region, like the Advocata Institute in Sri Lanka. With our support, that institute created a public registry of state-owned enterprises like banks and airlines that operate with big losses and proposed ways to reform them. We're finding partners in government too, like Victor Soto. He's the mayor of the city of Pasig in the Philippines. Victor set up a 24/7 hotline for constituents to report cases of corruption, has made the awarding of public contracts more transparent, has given community-based organizations a say in the way the city spends its resources. He's part of the State Department's first group of global anti-corruption champions that we announced earlier this year. And we'll continue to learn best practices from our fellow democracies. That's the idea behind the Summit for Democracy that President Biden convened last week, where President Jokowi spoke. Indeed, he was the first speaker. And the Bali Democracy Forum that Indonesia just held for the 14th time, and where I had an opportunity to speak. We'll also stand up against leaders who don't respect their people's rights, as we're seeing now in Burma. We'll continue to work with our allies and partners to press the regime to cease its indiscriminate violence, release all those unjustly detained, allow unhindered access, and restore Burma's path to inclusive democracy. ASEAN has developed a 5-point consensus that calls on the regime to...
And that was U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who is currently on his Southeast Asia tour in the Indonesian capital, Jakarta. During his speech, he outlined Washington's policy on the Indo-Pacific, and he further expressed support for Indonesia's leadership in the region. This comes at a time when the world's third largest democracy, and he said that Indonesia is a strong proponent of the rules-based international order.
and help build the secure, trusted system